My family photo was leaked on the dark web. Shortly after that, my sister went missing. I never imagined my life could take such a dark turn, especially not from something as mundane as a family photo. My name is Ethan, and what I'm about to share is a horrifying sequence of events that began one innocent evening when I stumbled upon a photograph of my family on the dark web. It started on a Friday night. I was home alone, my parents were out of town for the weekend, and my sister, Emily, was spending the night at her friend's house. I had always been curious about the darker corners of the internet, having heard all the stories and urban legends surrounding the dark web. So, with my curiosity piqued and nothing else to do, I decided to explore. I was careful, using a VPN and Tor browser to mask my presence. I navigated through various links, finding mostly what you'd expect: forums, illegal marketplaces, and shady services. I was about to call it a night when I clicked on one last link, a forum titled Faces of the Lost. At first, it seemed like a memorial page, filled with photos of missing persons and victims of unsolved crimes. I was scrolling through, feeling a mix of sadness and unease, when I saw it. A photo that made my heart stop and my blood run cold. There, amidst the other images, was a picture of my family. It was a candid shot taken at our last Thanksgiving, with me, my parents, and Emily all smiling at the camera. Panic set in. How did this photo get here? Why was it on this site? I frantically searched the page for any information but found none. The only text accompanying the photo was our last name, Sullivan, and the words, category, future. I couldn't think straight. I closed my laptop and tried to calm myself, rationalizing that it must have been some sick joke or a coincidence. Maybe someone hacked into our social media accounts and pulled the picture from there. But the more I thought about it, the more the dread grew. This wasn't a photo we ever posted online. It was taken by my uncle, who wasn't exactly tech savvy and never uploaded pictures to the internet. The next morning, I tried to push the incident out of my mind. Emily came home and my parents called to check in. I wanted to tell them about what I saw, but I didn't want to worry them. Instead, I decided to investigate further on my own. That night, I returned to the dark web, navigating back to the same forum. The photo was still there, but now there were comments beneath it. My hands trembled as I read them. Perfect choice. They'll be easy to get to. Can't wait to see the results. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. I clicked on the usernames, trying to find any clue about who these people were, but the profiles were empty. Whoever they were anonymous and untraceable. I spent the rest of the night scouring the internet for answers, but I found nothing that could explain why our photo was there or what category future meant. By morning I was exhausted and terrified. I decided it was time to tell my parents. Before I could call them, I received a text from an unknown number. The message read, "We see you, Ethan. Stop looking or you'll regret it." I froze, staring at the screen in disbelief. How did they know my name? How did they get my number? My phone buzzed again, and this time it was a photo. It showed our house, taken from the street with a timestamp from just a few minutes earlier. I ran to the window, looking out at the empty street. There was no one in sight, but the photo was proof enough. Someone was watching us, and they knew I had seen the picture. I called my parents, frantic, but they brushed it off as a prank. I even showed them the messages, but they insisted it was someone trying to scare me. They told me to block the number and ignore it. I didn't blame them. It sounded crazy even to me. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind, set my nerves on edge. I stayed up, watching the windows, expecting someone to break in at any moment. Nothing happened, but the feeling of being watched never left. The next morning, Emily was supposed to go to school, but she woke up feeling sick. My parents decided to let her stay home, and they left for work as usual. I had a bad feeling, but I couldn't convince them to stay. Around noon the phone rang. It was Emily, her voice trembling with fear. "Ethan, there's someone outside. They're just standing there, staring at the house." My heart pounded as I told her to stay hidden and call the police. I left work immediately, speeding home. By the time I got there, the police were already gone, and Emily was safe, but shaken. She described the man as tall, wearing a dark hoodie, with his face obscured. The police found no trace of him. That evening, we all sat down to talk about what was happening. My parents finally took me seriously, especially after seeing how scared Emily was. We decided to install security cameras around the house and contacted a private investigator to look into the threats. For a few days, things seemed to calm down. The cameras didn't catch anything unusual, and the investigator found no leads. But the sense of dread lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Then one night, everything changed. Emily went missing. I came home to find the front door wide open and the house in disarray. My parents were frantic, searching the house and calling out her name. I ran to her room and found it empty, her phone and backpack still there. There was no sign of a struggle, no note, nothing. We called the police, and a search began, but deep down, I knew this was connected to the photo on the dark web. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Someone had taken her. And it was all because of that damned picture. As the days passed with no word from Emily and no leads from the police, I found myself falling into despair. But amidst the fear and sorrow, a burning determination grew within me. I needed to find her, to bring her back, no matter the cost. I returned to the dark web, more desperate than ever. I scoured every forum, every chat room, searching for any clue, any mention of Emily. I posted pleas for help, offering anything in return for information. But the responses were either mocking or silent. It felt like I was chasing shadows in a labyrinth of nightmares. But I couldn't stop. Not until I found her. Not until she was safe. That's when the messages started again. More frequent and more disturbing. They sent pictures of Emily, bound and blindfolded, with messages taunting us. They described in vivid detail the things they planned to do, each threat more horrifying than the last. The worst part was, they knew everything about us. Our routines, our fears, our secrets. It was like they had eyes everywhere. And they enjoyed playing with us, savoring our desperation and pain. One message stood out, more chilling than the rest. It was a video, showing Emily crying, begging for help. A masked figure whispered to the camera, "Time's running out, Ethan. Keep looking, and she suffers. Stop and maybe we'll show mercy." I was paralyzed with fear and guilt. My sister's fate was in my hands, and every decision felt like a step deeper into a nightmare. But there was no turning back now. I had to face the darkness head on, no matter what it took. I had to save Emily. The days following Emily's disappearance were a blur of fear and hopelessness. My parents and I hardly spoke, each of us drowning in our own grief. The police continued their investigation, but they were no closer to finding her. The messages from the kidnappers became more frequent, each one more sadistic than the last. It was on a particularly cold and dreary evening that I received another message. This one was different. It was a link to a live stream. My hands shook as I clicked on it, fearing what I might see. The screen loaded to reveal a dimly lit room. In the center was Emily, tied to a chair, her face streaked with tears. A masked figure stood behind her, holding a piece of paper that read, "One chance, one choice." A distorted voice filled the room, chilling me to the bone. "Ethan, you're going to play a game. You have 24 hours to find the first clue. If you succeed, you'll get the next clue. Fail, and your sister suffers. The clock starts now." Before I could react, the stream ended, and the screen went black. I sat there, staring at the screen in disbelief. They were toying with us, turning our nightmare into some twisted game. But I had no choice. I had to play. The first clue was simple enough. Look where memories are made. It didn't take long to figure out that it referred to our family photo albums. I rushed to the living room, where we kept the albums on a shelf. I frantically flipped through the pages, my heart pounding in my chest. Tucked inside one of the albums was a small envelope. I tore it open and found a USB drive. With trembling hands, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. A single file was on it, labeled Clue 2. I opened it to find a video of Emily. She was in the same room, but this time, she was alone, her eyes wide with terror. She whispered, "Please, Ethan, hurry." Then the screen cut to black, and text appeared. "You found the first clue. Now find the second where secrets are buried." I knew immediately where to go. The old treehouse in our backyard was where Emily and I used to hide our secrets when we were kids. I grabbed a flashlight and headed outside. The night was eerily quiet, and every shadow seemed to pulse with malice. The treehouse was just as we had left it, untouched for years. I climbed the creaky ladder and searched every nook and cranny. Finally, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, I found another envelope. Inside was a piece of paper with a cryptic message, "The heart of the home." I ran back to the house, my mind racing. The kitchen. The living room. Where would they hide the next clue? Then it hit me. The fireplace. It had always been the center of our home, where we gathered during cold winter nights. I searched the mantel, the hearth, and finally, inside the chimney. There, tucked into a crack in the bricks, was another USB drive. Back in my room, I plugged it in, my hands slick with sweat. The video this time showed Emily in a different position, her face even more gaunt and pale. She sobbed quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, they're getting angrier. Please hurry." More text appeared on the screen. Clue 3, where light meets dark. I racked my brain, trying to decipher the meaning. Then I remembered the basement. It was always dark, but there was a single window where a sliver of light would creep in during the day. I hated going down there as a kid, and now it seemed even more sinister. Armed with a flashlight, I descended the stairs into the basement. The air was damp and musty, and the only sound was the creaking of the old wooden steps. I scanned the room, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. In the far corner, where the light from the window barely touched, I found a small box. Inside the box was a key and a note. "The final clue lies with the forgotten." My heart sank. I knew what that meant. Our old family cabin, long abandoned, deep in the woods. It was a place filled with memories, but also a place we had left behind for a reason. I gathered what supplies I could, not daring to tell my parents. They were already on the brink of collapse, and I couldn't bear to burden them with this horror. I left a note saying I was following a lead, promising to bring Emily back. The drive to the cabin was long and harrowing. The road was rough and the forest seemed to close in around me, each tree a silent sentinel watching my journey. The cabin loomed ahead, dark and foreboding. I hadn't been there in years, and it felt like stepping into another world. I used the key to unlock the door and stepped inside. The air was stale, and dust covered every surface. I searched room by room, looking for any sign of the final clue. In the attic, amidst old furniture and forgotten relics, I found it, a small chest with a combination lock. My mind raced as I tried to remember the combination. It was a date, the day we moved out of the cabin. I tried several dates, my frustration growing, until finally, the lock clicked open. Inside was a single piece of paper. "Come to the place where it all began." I knew where I had to go. The old abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. It was where our parents had first met, and where they had taken us as kids for some reason that always seemed strange to me. It was also the place where the darkest memories of my childhood lay, memories I had tried to forget. I drove there, the weight of fear and dread pressing down on me. The factory was a hulking, decrepit building, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. I entered, the echo of my footsteps the only sound. Inside, I found a chair with a video camera set up in front of it. On the chair was a note: "Sit down and press play." I did as instructed, my heart hammering in my chest. The video played, showing Emily in the same dark room. The masked figure appeared again, holding a knife. "You made it, Ethan. Now for the final test. Will you sacrifice yourself for your sister?" The screen went black and another message appeared. "Go to the basement." I had no choice. I made my way to the basement, each step feeling like a step towards my doom. The basement was even darker and colder than the rest of the factory. In the center of the room was a chair, and tied to it was Emily, unconscious but alive. Before I could reach her, the masked figure appeared, blocking my path. "You've come far, Ethan. But now you must choose. Your life for hers." I didn't hesitate. I stepped forward, ready to do whatever it took to save my sister. The figure raised the knife and I braced myself for the end. But just as the knife descended, the lights flickered and went out. The room plunged into darkness, and I heard a scuffle, then silence. When the lights came back on, the figure was gone and Emily was free. She ran to me, crying, and we held each other, not daring to believe it was over. But deep down I knew it wasn't. We had survived this nightmare, but the darkness that had invaded our lives was still out there, waiting. And as we left the factory, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The relief I felt when we found Emily was short-lived. Although she was physically unharmed, the trauma she had endured left deep scars. She barely spoke, her eyes hollow and distant. My parents tried to comfort her, but nothing seemed to reach her. And then there was the constant fear that gnawed at me. The sense that this nightmare wasn't truly over. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's condition didn't improve. My parents and I decided it was best for her to see a therapist. I hoped that talking to someone might help her open up and start to heal. But even as I tried to move forward, the memories of the dark web, the threats, and the masked figure haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about the man who had taken her. Who were they? What did they want? Why had they targeted us? The questions spun endlessly in my mind, and the lack of answers drove me to the brink of obsession. I knew I had to find out more, to make sure they couldn't hurt us again. One evening, after Emily had gone to bed and my parents were asleep, I returned to the dark web, I navigated through the familiar links, trying to find any trace of the people who had tormented us. It felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. But I was determined. After hours of fruitless searching, I stumbled upon a forum that seemed different from the others. It was a private group, accessible only by invitation. The forum's title sent a chill down my spine. The Watchers. I knew I had to get inside, but the forum was heavily guarded. I tried various methods to hack my way in, but it was no use. Finally, I decided to post a message on another forum, asking for an invite to the Watchers. I explained that I had information that could be valuable to them. A few days later, I received a reply. It was a simple message with a link to a private chat room. My heart raced as I clicked on it. Inside, I was greeted by a user with the handle Observer01. "You want in?" they asked. "Yes," I replied. "I have information about a recent event involving one of your members." There was a pause before the next message appeared. "Prove it." I described the events that had transpired, the photo of my family, the clues, the abduction, and the factory. I included details that only someone involved would know. Another pause. Then, "Welcome to the Watchers." A new link appeared, granting me access to the private forum. I took a deep breath and clicked on it. The forum was filled with threads discussing various operations, targets, and methods of surveillance. It was a chilling realization that this group was much larger and more organized than I had imagined. I spent hours reading through the threads, trying to find any mention of my family or the masked figure. Finally, I found a post titled, "Operation Sullivan." My blood ran cold as I opened the thread. It was a detailed account of everything they had done to us, written in a clinical, detached manner. They described how they had selected us, surveilled us, and executed their plan. The masked figure was referred to as the Handler, and his role was to carry out the physical aspects of the operation. The final post in the thread was dated the night we rescued Emily. It read, "Operation compromised. Handler MIA. New target selection in progress." I felt a mix of horror and rage. They were planning to move on to another family, to inflict the same terror on someone else. I knew I had to do something to stop them, but I didn't know where to start. Over the next few days, I gathered as much information as I could from the forum. I learned about their hierarchy, their methods, and their obsession with control and power. It became clear that this was more than just a group of sadists. They were organized and dangerous. I reached out to the private investigator we had hired before, sharing everything I had discovered. He was shocked by the depth of the organization, but agreed to help me. Together we formulated a plan to expose the Watchers and bring them down. We started by gathering evidence, screenshots of forum posts, chat logs, and anything that could link them to criminal activities. We contacted cybersecurity experts who helped us trace the origins of some of the posts, slowly piecing together the identities of key members. It was a risky move, but we also decided to bait them. I created a new identity online and posted a message on the forum, claiming to be a potential new member with valuable information about high-profile targets. It wasn't long before I was contacted by Observer 101 again. This time, the conversation took a different turn. They wanted to meet in person, to verify my identity, and discuss the potential targets. I agreed, setting up a meeting in a public place, heavily surveilled by our team. The day of the meeting, I was a bundle of nerves. I arrived early, scanning the area for any sign of trouble. The private investigator and a team of undercover officers were in place, ready to intervene at the first sign of danger. A man approached me, fitting the description of Observer 01 we had pieced together from our research. He was unassuming, blending into the crowd effortlessly. He sat down across from me and smiled. "Ethan Sullivan," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We meet at last." I fought to keep my composure. "Let's get this over with." We talked for a while, dancing around the topic, each of us trying to gauge the other. Finally, he leaned in and whispered, "You think you're clever, don't you? But we've been watching you. We know what you're planning." Before I could react, he stood up and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized the full extent of their reach. They had known about our plan all along. I rushed to meet the investigator and the officers, but it was too late. Observer 01 was gone, and with him our chance to bring down the Watchers. That night, as I sat alone in my room, I received another message. It was a video, showing Emily sleeping peacefully in her bed. The same distorted voice from before said, "You can't stop us, Ethan. We'll always be watching." My blood ran cold. I knew then that this was far from over. The Watchers were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their next move. And I was their prime target. The weeks that followed were a blur of paranoia and fear. The watchers had made it clear that they were still watching us, and every moment felt like walking on a knife's edge. Emily was still haunted by her ordeal, and the rest of my family lived in constant anxiety. The sense of safety that we once took for granted was completely shattered. I continued to dig deeper into the watchers, desperate to find a way to stop them. The more I uncovered, the more sinister their operations seemed. They thrived on fear, manipulating and tormenting families for their own twisted pleasure. My private investigator and I compiled everything we had, but it still felt like a drop in the ocean. One night, as I was going through the forum once more, I received a direct message from an unknown user. The message read, "I can help you. Meet me at the old train station at midnight. Come alone." It was a risky move, but I felt I had no choice. If there was even a chance that this could lead to stopping the watchers, I had to take it. I left a note for my parents, telling them I was following a lead, and headed out. The old train station was abandoned and decrepit, a fitting setting for the dark turn my life had taken. As I walked through the crumbling structure, I felt a presence behind me. I turned around to see a figure stepping out of the shadows. It was a woman, her face obscured by a hood. "You must be Ethan," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my distance. "I'm someone who knows how to stop them," she replied. "I was once part of the Watchers, but I left. I've been trying to bring them down ever since." Her story sounded too good to be true, but I was desperate. "Why should I trust you?" I asked. She pulled back her hood, revealing a face etched with pain and determination. "Because I know what they're capable of. And I know their weaknesses." We sat down on a nearby bench, and she explained her plan. The Watchers operated through a network of servers spread across different locations. If we could locate and destroy their central server, we could cripple their operations. She had managed to gather information on the locations of these servers but needed my help to access them. It was a dangerous plan, but it was the best shot we had. Over the next few days, we prepared meticulously. I contacted the private investigator and shared the plan with him. He agreed to help, bringing in a team of trusted colleagues to assist us. Our first target was a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Under the cover of darkness, we infiltrated the building, avoiding security cameras and guards. The woman, who I learned was named Sarah, led us to the server room. We planted the necessary devices to hack into the system and gather the information we needed. From there, it was a race against time. We moved from location to location, each one more heavily guarded than the last. We faced numerous close calls, but our determination kept us going. Finally, we had all the data we needed to locate the central server. It was hidden in an unassuming office building downtown. The final stage of the plan was the most dangerous. We had to break into the building, access the server room, and destroy the central server. If we were caught, there would be no escape. The night of the operation, I could barely contain my nerves. Sarah, the private investigator, and the rest of the team were all focused, determined to see this through. We entered the building under the guise of maintenance workers, making our way to the server room with the equipment we needed. Everything was going smoothly until we reached the server room. As we began our work, an alarm sounded. Within moments, security guards swarmed the building. A firefight ensued, and chaos erupted. We fought our way to the server, determined to complete our mission. In the midst of the battle, I managed to reach the server and plant the final device. With a press of a button, the system began to overload. Sparks flew, and the room was filled with the hum of destruction. The central server was going down. As we made our escape, I saw Sarah fall, hit by a stray bullet. I wanted to go back for her, but she shook her head. "Go, Ethan. Finish this." With a heavy heart, I ran, knowing her sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. We barely made it out, the building erupting in flames behind us. The central server was destroyed, and the Watchers' network was crippled. In the aftermath, the police raided several known locations associated with the Watchers, arresting numerous members. The media picked up the story, and soon the public was aware of the dark organization that had been lurking in the shadows. Emily began to recover, slowly but surely, as the threat that had loomed over us was finally lifted. My parents and I started to rebuild our lives, grateful for the second chance we had been given. But the scars remained, a constant reminder of the darkness we had faced. I knew that while we had struck a major blow, remnants of the Watchers might still be out there, waiting. We would always have to be vigilant, but we had regained our sense of safety and hope. The nightmare was over, but the memory of it would forever be etched in our minds. And I vowed to spend the rest of my life ensuring that no one else would have to endure the same terror that we had faced.